Hello, dears, and welcome to my show. I'm your friendly neighborhood librarian, and I'm being hacked? Who is it? Who's there?
I am the author.
The author of the book I'm reviewing?
No, the author of The Secret Life of American Teenager, of course that author.
Oh, well, it's kind of a surprise to hear from you. How are you?
Oh, you know, can't complain. I just finished watching your review, and I have to say I really admire your show, and I'm glad you took the time to read my book and spread your opinion about it.
Cool, I'm glad you liked it.
You should take it down.
What?
I think it would be better for both of us if you just took the review down.
Why?
Well, you made some mistakes. For example, you said that my novel was self-published. It was actually independently published by Escape Artist Press.
Oh, well, I'm sorry. That was so sloppy. I can't believe I made that mistake. Okay, why don't I go and edit the description right now and...
No, I think it would be better for both of us if the review just didn't exist anymore.
But won't a disclaimer...
A disclaimer's not good enough!
Are you... okay?
Don't touch me! Reviewer. You don't have the special effects necessary to make your hand touch mine anyway. Now, you've also accused my book of having an unholy amount of typos in it. That's not true in the new edition.
Well, I was just reviewing the one Amazon sent me.
That version is out of print!
What? How can it be out of print when I bought it?
Silence!
And your third infraction is the most serious. You used particular material that I'm trying to keep separate from my author work. I cannot allow this review to exist with those clips in it.
Oh, you mean the clips of your... Did you find a way to censor me?
And I'll do more than that if you fail to comply with my demands. I can sue you. I own copyright on that book.
But reviewing is protected under fair use. Plus, it's free promotion of your independently published work. You should know all this already. You used to be an online... Okay, that's just getting annoying. Look, how about I just revise the review?
I guess we can come to an agreement. If you go back and edit your month-old review according to every stipulation in this contract, I suppose I'll let it say up. The author has spoken.
I'm your friendly neighborhood librarian, and I've just been censored for the first time in this show's epic 2-month history. Yeah, I'm gonna take that about as maturely as I can. Hey, I said as mature as I can. Psh, like you're perfect. So, speaking of non-perfection, corrections to the review you're about to see. So you know what I don't tell authors? How to write their books. And yet authors feel that they have creative control over the reviews that their work congregates. Go figure. Well, I'm gonna look on the right side of that. If an author or creator of a body of work actually thinks your review is significant enough to dispute, I guess that's a sign you're making it. Right? So, without further ado, here are the corrections. Number 1. I said this book was self-published. It is not. It was independently published by Escape Artist Press. Escape Artist Press. Escape Artist Press. And don't you forget it. Number 2. Okay guys, time for a little show and tell. This is my Amazon.com order of Altered. Yeah. And see the date there, August 7th, 2012. Alright, this is my copy of Altered, and if you go to the back here, you'll see that it was actually made August 7th, the day that I ordered it. Apparently, this version of the book that I bought off of Amazon is an out-of-print edition. The author has told me that there is another version that has a better editing job, and so my comments on the editing are now null and void, and my review does not represent the work anymore. So, all of the reviews of Altered so far actually occurred before August 7th, so I guess they're all null and void, and I guess by that logic no one should ever review any book unless they're sure that no other edition is ever going to come out. Sometime between August 7th and today, September 14th, in the span of basically a month, another edition was launched. So I'm just going to look through this book real quick and tell you about the editing. Okay, title page. Okay, there's a prologue. I'm going to go to the first page of chapter 1. Okay, good. Oh, third sentence. There's sort of a subject-verb agreement error. It's not something that's technically wrong, but it's wrong syntax-wise. It's something that you could kind of tell if you read it out loud that it sounded awkward. You sort of have to have a good eye for English. It's sort of a first draft error. Okay, and I found a second error here on the first page of the first chapter, where it's basically the dialogue tag error that's really common, where someone says, "I see," smiled John. "I don't want to know," frowned Anne. You can't really frown or smile or grin words, so that's actually an incorrect dialogue tag. And there are things like that throughout this edition of the book, but apparently there's another one, so keep that in mind. And third, there is a certain venue that the author used that she no longer wants to associate with her writing. I usually give a little background as to why I came across the novels that I read, and so, as usual, I added clips to illustrate my point, but I can no longer use those clips. Now, I'm not sure why you would advertise your book on a venue that you want to keep totally separate from your book, but apparently that's my problem now. So, the point is that there are going to be clips taken out, and in place of them I'm going to be giving a few opinions about different aspects of the book, the edition that I read, and so basically you're going to be getting a little less backstory, but a little more review, so it all evens out, I guess. So, without further ado, please enjoy the controversial review. Hello, dears, and welcome to my show. I'm your friendly neighborhood librarian, reading the stinkers and praising the masterpieces since 2012. I also happen to own a lot of hats. Do you know why I own so many hats? Because I'm crazy. And you know who else is crazy? Characters in the book I'm going to review today. Yes, I am the queen of awkward segues. If only I had a crown. Altered by Aubrey Coletti. I came across this novel. The cover of this book is really striking. It probably would have caught my eye if I had seen it in a store. And the book cover is the first impression that the audience gets of your book, so despite the fact that you're not supposed to judge a book by its cover, it is a really important first impression. Now, I really like the atmosphere created here by the cinder block walls, the stark black and white tile pattern on the floor, and the kind of broken down door. And the title Altered is actually superimposed on eyes. Yeah, I don't really get it, but I dig it. I don't know whose eyes they're supposed to be. They have wrinkles around them, so possibly the principal of the school or the headmistress. I will say that the lightning in the background looks kind of fake, but I've noticed that most lightning effects on book covers for some reason look fake. Aubrey Coletti, who independently published this novel, Altered, which she apparently started when she was only 15 and completed in her senior year of high school. So, could this teen writer be the next S.E. Hinton? Let's find out. I'll take you through the basic story first. J. Alter Academy is a school right out of a horror movie. It ensnares unsuspecting parents and children with promises of a new start. You see, the academy accepts problem children as boarders, kids who were given up on by society. But there's another similarity between the boarders. They all have special abilities. And by that, I don't just mean they're super smart. Oh no. I mean special as in lighting fires with their mind, supersonic hearing, and moving things with their mind. But all is not well in Alter Academy. The rules are strict, and there are inhumane practices like shock therapy. A group of boarders decide they've had enough with being kicked puppies and decide to bite back. And that is how our story begins. Okay, so it was very pleasant to see a novel that utilized so many different points of view. This novel is written in the third-person omniscient, which was a great idea, especially since there were so many characters. It helped to establish their respective quirks. However, the author has the unfortunate tendency to switch points of views within the same scene, or sometimes within the same paragraph. To say the least, this made for a confusing novel reading experience at times. In addition, the characters are quickly thrown at us, and the scenes are rotated with little rhyme or reason before we even know who anyone is. The weakest part of the characterization is, by far, the introduction to the characters. I didn't like the way the physical descriptions were dumped on us all at once, and would have preferred a more subtly threaded approach. Also, the author frequently tags one character's line of dialogue with another character's actions, and with so many characters to keep track of, it doesn't do the writing any favors. Now, I'll talk some more about characters in a bit, but first I want to address the writing style. It is modern and easy to read. It's not very long either. It took me, a moderately fast reader, about 2 days to finish it. There is explicit swearing, but I never felt that the book was trying to be edgy just for the sake of being edgy. The swearing instead came with the territory of the characters. The book is written in such a way that almost every scene ends on a cliffhanger, and this reminded me a lot of watching a show. In that same vein, this book is very dialogue heavy, not so much on the description. In a show that would make sense because a show is a visual medium and so you don't really need to describe the setting. But in the book, description would have helped to break up the massive blocks of dialogue. The characters. The main kids are Toni, Joseph, Charlie, and Lieutenant Melvin, Anton, and later Seth, Greg, and Gina. Yeah, I think it's safe to say that this cast was a wee bit overpopulated. Although the characters were delightful, there were so many to a scene that I had trouble remembering who was who. The antagonists are basically the teachers, and their personalities blend together. they're sadists. But Mrs. Carter and the headmistress are notable because Mrs. Carter is also Toni's caretaker and the principal of the school. The headmistress is the lady in charge of the principal. She gets a cameo in the prologue. You see glimpses of her here and there during the story, and she gets a bigger role near the end. The characters' names are weird too. Some characters go by more than one. Joseph always introduces himself with his full name, Joseph Nathaniel Valdez, which is weird because no other character does that. In fact, every time his name is mentioned near the beginning, it's always his full name. In fact, I don't think any other character's middle name is even revealed. Charlie and Toni are girls, just so's you know. Amina Jackson is introduced to us as Amina Jackson. But later in that same scene, this narrator starts talking about Lieutenant. And later in separate scenes, this Lieutenant character keeps popping up, and I honestly didn't know who that was until a later scene when Lieutenant finally says, "Oh, my real name is Amina Jackson, but I go by Lieutenant." And then I sort of got it, but there was some confusion there. There is one character named Anne, and she is referenced as Anne throughout the narrative the whole time, and throughout all the dialogue the whole time, except for one instance when a character calls her Annabelle. So what? Is her name Annabelle? Why wasn't this established before? Anton always insists on being called either Anton or Anthony, and this is hinted to be some sort of multiple personality thing, but I'm never really quite sure. And near the end of the book, he is inexplicably called Ant, or that might be his clone. This book doesn't explain very well sometimes. Oh, and they have one teacher for an ally, and her name is, get this, Miss Lovejoy. Yep, I'll just let that one sink in for a minute. There is a romance that was foreshadowed way too early. It was obvious that it was going to happen practically since the two characters met each other, but the way that it played out ended up being both interesting and realistic. I enjoyed watching the relationship blossom, which is a big deal for me as I generally dislike romance in my fiction. Also, there is a part where the girlfriend cheats on the boyfriend, and the boyfriend doesn't just take her back because she gives him puppy dog looks. Yes! Mary Sue averted. This character made bad decisions and has to deal with the consequences. Later, someone tells off the boy who the girl cheated with, but also tells off the girl who cheated. Again, I like the doses of common sense in the novel. And I also like how poetic it got at times. The story is obviously inspired by classic literature, especially One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which is referenced by name here. But there are some true gems, especially made poignant by the way the characters speak. The speech patterns are admittedly reminiscent of a juvenile delinquent's speech patterns, but they prove that there's more to them than that by these gentle wisdoms that they sometimes offer. The juxtaposition there is amazing. Now let's talk about editing. This is
Independently.
published, but I unfortunately cannot give it a pass. Put simply, the editing in this is abysmal. In the acknowledgments, the author thanks her two incredibly skilled editors, and when I saw that, I could not believe my eyes, how the world's filled with filth and lies. But seriously, this made me want to take out my red pen. First of all, many chapters are labeled the. Inexplicably, just the. Look, either title your chapters or don't, but don't do this weird halfway thing. It's better to name your chapter Chapter 3, the third chapter. rather than Chapter 3, the run-on sentences galore. Commas are not the same thing as semicolons. Lack of commas when needed. Incorrect dialogue tags, typos, spelling errors, misplaced and missing apostrophes. I could go on. It's obviously unedited or edited by a team that didn't have a proper grasp on grammar or the English language. Step it up. But the dialogue sounded very natural. The author has talent, and it shines through in her character interactions, convoluted though they may be. Toni has weight issues, as well as panic attacks. We later find out that those panic attacks are driven by an incident in her childhood. I won't spoil what that incident is, but it is very harrowing, believable, and foreshadowed well. Lieutenant is a black girl with telekinesis and struggles with mania. Sometimes she has so many ideas in her head that they spill out all at once, and she, for example, writes with one hand and draws with another. She is very no-nonsense and wants to be in the armed forces one day. She certainly has the gumption for it. Joseph is a Latino boy who is slightly dorky but has a big chip on his shoulder. He has some of the best action scenes in the book, and by the way, the fights and chase scenes are heart-poundingly intense. Melvin is a gay guy, friends with Lieutenant, and doesn't talk much. The silent stan of the outfit. Charlie is adorable. She's a very short girl, even nicknamed Garden Gnome because of her diminutive stature, and she struggles the most with thinking she's crazy. And she kind of is. She hears voices, but she also can tune into what people are thinking. She also has heightened senses. Anne is flirty, outgoing, and spunky. She is the closest character to becoming a Mary Sue, especially in a cringeworthy scene where she defies her gym teacher's authority by basically pole dancing in front of him. She is easily provoked to anger, very nasty at times, and even promiscuous. No, really. Most of the time, none of her allies seem to care how despicably she acts, but because she is called out on some occasions, I'll let her slide. Anton has little personality, but he is Lieutenant's friend, black, and electricity seems to fizzle out around him. Not letting that guy near my laptop. Seth is introduced as an antagonistic bully, and he turns out to be a psychopath who kills animals because he can. He allies with our group, though. It turns out about as well as you'd expect. Eventually, some non-boarders join up with the boarders' cause. They are Greg and Gina. Nothing too spectacular to report. The boarders are all spirited with big attitudes, and they aren't afraid to express them. I think because there were so many characters, it was impossible to thoroughly develop them all, but I did appreciate the diversity of the cast. And it was really nice, I'm not gonna lie, to read about some intelligent black characters, as well as a likable Latino protagonist. So kudos to Miss Coletti on that account. Kudos also on the research that must have gone into this novel. It's obvious that the author really knows her stuff. The attention to detail on the shocks and later on tranquilizers was a real treat to read. The book did offer some serious moral questions. At some points, the children realized that they were hurting innocent people who didn't deserve it, and they frequently questioned whether they were doing the right thing. A particularly poignant moment that stuck with me and actually made me a little uncomfortable was the children comparing their actions to Columbine. Woo! Pulling no punches. This is set in our world, so there are some pop culture references and the like that I found a little distracting, but that's a minor point. And although I praise the book for its common sense, there are some logical fallacies. For example, the children eventually end up getting outfitted in these shock buds all over their bodies 24/7. And then the teachers are giving these controls. At the push of the button, they can send an electrical zap through the students to keep them in line. But near the end of the book, two characters get hot and heavy, and they rip off the buds like they were nothing. So what? They could have done that the whole time? It's made apparent through the book that The shocks are extremely painful, and yet all of the kids could have ripped off the buds at any time, so why didn't they? Eh. The novel ends on a cliffhanger, and while this is somewhat understandable as the cover clearly reads Book 1 of the Academy series, it felt like an incomplete story. Many questions were left unanswered, and I feel that the novel would have been stronger with an actual ending. While the ending does make me want to read more, but unfortunately the second book is still being written. Bummer. One thing's for sure, I'll be keeping my eye out for any progress on the Academy series. Would I recommend this book? Yes, if only to support an independently published novel. I think you can tell that the book was written by a 15-year-old in the sometimes clumsy and juvenile writing style, but there is sophistication in the thoughts. The concept is interesting and the characters are delightful. Well, the ones that are defined well, anyway. It's not too long, so it won't take up too many hours of your life. Although there are slight aspects verging on the paranormal in terms of the kids' powers, it's still a fairly realistic novel, especially so in the teen dialogue department and the action, which is just brilliant to read. Unfortunately, the poor editing brings the score down for me. If it was just a few isolated incidents, it wouldn't be such a big deal, but it was throughout the novel, and that level of sloppiness is unacceptable. It's a 3-star story, but a 1-star editing job, so I'll average it out and give the novel a grade of 2 stars. Out of 5. So that was altered. Please go check it out, especially if you're not a grammar freak like me, as I think you'll really enjoy the ride. So, speaking of crazy people, and different hats, and the queen of awkward segues, next on the list is a book about the craziest nut job out there. That's right, we're gonna meet Hannibal himself in Red Dragon by Thomas Harris. Till next time, I'm your friendly neighborhood librarian, signing out.